Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And this is a little bit of a different video. So I'm going to be doing a product review for the XLC.co.uk Kickstarter. Now they've launched a brand new series of pre-printed 28mm scale terrain, perfectly used for pretty much any 28mm sci-fi range. Obviously being a Games Workshop 40k fanatic, this works for me. It's pre-printed, so you haven't got to paint any of it. So for those that have been watching my channel before, you know that I have a big thing about painting lots of terrain, and so I'm going to be having a look at one of these that's been pre-printed. So the XLC have been kind enough to send me one of their pre-release copies before the Kickstarter goes live on April the 14th. All the links in the description below and up on the screen for you now. And I've been sent the plasma generator. So this is part of a massive series that, if you bought the whole lot, easily covers a nice 6x4 board at pretty much a reasonable price. So what we're going to do is take a look at how this all goes together and take some nice pictures at the very end. So let's crack straight on with the video. So here we go then, guys. This is the box that has arrived from the XLC. Just before I want to sort of preface this video, I've not been under any obligation to champion the product or anything else. This is an impartial review. No obligation to the XLC has been implied, so this is non-sponsored as such. So let's open the box and see what's inside. So just cutting away the remainder of the masking tape that's sealed up the box here. I know there's a number of these items have been sent out to a bunch of YouTubers, so that if you're looking for other Desecration City products, just Google the XLC and Desecration City in YouTube and you'll find a few other reviews of some of their other goodies as well. So inside the box then I have two little bags. One is the plasma generator, and as a little bonus I've also been sent one of the tower modules as well. So let's just get the box out of the way and have a look at what's in the bags. So as I said, yep, the first bag is the plasma generator. You can see there on the little label that's been included in there. Just sort of having a little feel of how solid this kind of stuff is. My only experience with laser cut MDF is actually with my paint racks, which you can see in the top left hand corner of this video. That is my only experience with MDF in this kind of format, really, this sort of 3mm MDF. So I want to have a look at sort of the easier bag to sort of get at, really. So let's have a look at the tower first, and then we'll move into the actual plasma generator itself. So I just wanted to have a look at sort of the thickness, how the printing and the sort of the pre-painted effect looks on these pieces. So for the tower, it's quite a simple build. There's only 6 pieces to this, but I'm just looking at the design here. Now, from a rigidity factor, 3mm MDF is pretty solid. It's got a little bit of flex in it, but nothing too much and nothing to worry about. Each of the 4 panels in this particular section are detailed on both sides, even though 2/3 of the inside you won't actually see, but where you get to sort of the little top section where the troops can be placed, there's detailing on either side of that so that you can actually so it actually looks good on a battlefield. So from a quality perspective, initial inspection does actually look pretty good. So quite happy with how this is all looking, and the printed effect is actually really nice. So all those sort of rust streaks, the grime build up at the bottom, it looks like there's a lot of thought gone into the actual design. I mean, it could have been a lot easier to have done with a more basic print. So quite happy with that. But let's take a look at what this video is really focusing on, and that is the plasma generator itself. And there's certainly a lot more parts involved in the plasma generator. So I'm going to put a little picture up in the corner to show you what we're going to be actually building towards here. Now, because these are pre-release and not available yet because it's still going through the Kickstarter process, there are no instructions available. However, the XLC on their own YouTube channel are actually starting to produce some construction guides for some of these kits already. So there'll be some online instruction, and I believe there'll be some actual instruction within each kit as well. So if you want to go and check those out on YouTube, their channel is the XLC.co.uk, and I'll put a link in the description below as well for you. So the first thing to note is the flexible nature of this piece of MDF here. This is the circular section that goes over the top and is actually the container of the plasma itself. Then we get a couple of end panels for the actual lower part of the building, and we'll just lay these all out sort of in a logical fashion so we can see exactly what's going on. So these are sort of little side pods that make it look a little bit more rigid than it actually is. Then we have the side parts to the plasma generator as well, which that curvy part bends around. 2 bits of interior detail, some side panels, the top plate, and a door section. And exactly, yeah, as you can see just on the other side of there, anything that you can't see has no detail on it, so that's not a problem at all. So it's just a case now of working out how to put this together without a guide. So what I've done is off screen I've actually had a little test play, just so I kindly vaguely know how it's all going to bolt together, and I'm not going to make a complete idiot on this video. I've got myself a little pot of PVA glue ready to go, and we can start putting the thing together. So the first thing we can work on then is the plasma generator part on the top, the big glowy piece. Now you can see actually that it doesn't look like the picture. So there's a reason for that, and that is that sort of piece in my right hand there with the bendy part on it is actually got a protective layer of film over it, almost like a bit of masking tape, and that's to protect the actual laser from burning the pre-printed image that's on the underside of that. Quite a clever little idea really, because those little laser cuts to make it curvy are obviously are all quite close together, and the burn effect from the laser would have damaged the print. So that was a little bit of a weird thing to actually spot at first, but fortunately the XLC were quite pleasant in their communication when I made myself look like an idiot and didn't realise that was a protective coat at first, because the email that came to me actually disappeared into a spam folder, so got all that sorted pretty quick. So now we know how this is all going to go together. At first we can start applying the PVA glue into the right sections. So anything that's got a flush edge to it, that's where you put the glue, and anything that's got a little raised section sticking out, you put the glue on the underside of that, because that then connects into the little sockets that are on the curvy parts. So you can see me there just putting that PVA glue on the underside of the bits that are sort of proud and stick out, and that makes sense when you come to bend this round one of the end sections. And once we have the glue all in the right place, we can now wrap this round the first end section before we go on to the second one. So it actually is very, very carefully measured out. There's no room for error when it's all laser cut, because obviously it's working to a program with all the distances all carefully measured out, and there's no wiggle room here. Everything is completely and utterly flush. There's no sort of millimeter gaps or anything like that that you can wiggle around. It is completely flush fit, and as you can see, that forms that perfect semicircle at the top with those straight edges down below, and that goes really nicely together. So once that's now held by one hand, I can now apply the glue to the other end. I thought this was sort of an easier way of doing it for me, because the other end will now start to dry while it's in my hand, and it means I get to keep the curvature already in place. Now I did try initially when I was test fitting this to do the curvature to the base plate that you can see in the screen on the right hand side there, but then you won't be able to get the end panels in properly because of the amount of little lugs that you've got to do in both the base and the sides. So I felt this was the easier way to put it together for me. So just, you know, one hand holding it and then the other hand doing the glue so that we can get this other end panel on just like this. And as you can see, that goes on pretty easily. Again, as there's no wiggle room, you do have to be pretty accurate, and it does eventually all click into place with a little bit of persuasion. And there we go, that sort of lined up really quick. Just sort of wipe out any excess glue that you might have seep out, but other than that, that's gone together quite nicely. What we can now do then is apply glue to the base of this, just along all of the edges, and then the insides again of those bits that stick out, because they're the bits that disappear into the sockets that are on the base plate, and you don't want glue on the bottom because there's nothing to glue to, so you glue on the inside so that you glue panel to panel as such. So yep, just slap a little bit of glue in and around, and again, because it dries clear and it's all it's PVA based, it's easy to wipe off, but it does hold this this kit really nicely together. So once we've got the glue in the right place, so just a last little bit on the inside of that side, we can now apply it to the base section, the base plate. And again, I found this a little bit tricky at first, I'll be entirely honest with you, because it is so precisely cut. Now, those because it's a bendy panel and you've got 4 lugs to try and get into place, it did take a little bit of wiggling around, but eventually it all dropped in place. But just as a heads up, I did find that just a little bit awkward for some reason. Maybe it was just me being me or not, I don't really know. But as you can see, it all clipped together all nice and easy. I'll just put that aside now to let it dry a little bit more and let that glue go off. And while that's going off, we can take a look at the base section. So the base section is basically a box with a couple of extended semicircles over the top, which is quite simple. So we've got 2 of these end panels, one of which has a door section in it, which has a little outer U-shape piece to make a door frame, and then the interior door itself. Then you've got 2 side panels, and then you've got a bunch of these little support stabilizer pieces. And then also there's a couple of semicircles to hide some of the detail, or to provide some detail, sorry, on the inside of those semicircles. So let's start putting this structure together, and then we can drop the top plasma section onto it. So being a little box, it's quite easy to put together. So I'm just using the natural shape of it to sort of prop itself together, and then just applying the glue in the same places that I did with the other sections. So if you've got the sticky out bits, you put it on the inside, as it were, and where you've got the flat edges, you put it on the outside flush wall. It's easy to tell though when you just sort of dry fit it, and you can work out where the glue needs to be applied. Whilst that's sort of being held in place by one hand, I can apply the glue to the top section, ready to receive that top plate with the plasma generator on, and then just clip in the end section. Now at this stage it is quite fragile because it's sort of a bit twisty, and as you can see, sort of the side panels do pop out, so you do need to have like several hands going on to keep it in place. But it's not too bad once you get to this stage, and once everything is sort of clipped together, it holds itself together quite nicely. So all we've got left to do now is put on the final bits of detail. So first thing to do then is to put these little semicircles in, and as you can see, they sort of just drop in there just to cover up that blank side panel that is blank at the very top. So just stick a little bit of PVA on the side there, and then just squish that onto the side panel. Then we simply rinse and repeat this exact process for the other side. Now, putting a little bit of PVA on the bottom, I don't think it's overly necessary. But, you know, just for the sake of completeness, you know, just to make sure it all goes together nicely. And as you can see, just make sure you just run your finger over the top, sweep out any excess glue, and make sure it's all nice and lined up, and then we can move on to the other one. Just a little dab of glue there. And that little pot of glue that I poured there is I can't remember, the 50ml pot, I think. It came with an airbrush, and I've hardly touched any of it. I can imagine you can do the whole tabletop of Desecration City terrain with that small amount of glue. It goes so far, and it holds so well on this MDF terrain. So that's the 2 little semicircles. Just using a little cotton bud stick to wipe out the excess glue, because I can't get my fat fingers in there, and just to sort of get into those little corners, a little cotton bud works perfectly for that. Now what we need to do, these little stabiliser pieces come in 2 halves, so they're printed on one side only, and you get 4 lefties and 4 righties. So what you've got to do is pick out a pair and glue those together first, and then you can stick them into the gap. And those gaps are obviously 6mm wide, because 2 3mm. Using my advanced mathematics A-level qualification here, we can see that makes 6mm. So a little bit of glue in between, push those together, and we do that 4 times, and then we can stick it onto the side. So I've put a couple together here now, and then we just skip forward a little bit, and all I'm going to do is apply glue on those flush sides, and then onto the edge of the bits that stick out, as before with all the other bits of the MDF terrain, those little lugs, just to make sure the glue is applied to the right surfaces, and they just slot into the side. And again, just using my cotton bud just to wipe out any excess splurge of glue, and then we can move on and do the second one. Just make sure that's nice and straight, and obviously, as I've said a couple of times now, it is pretty accurately cut, because it is done with a laser. So they do fit in, you know, there's no real wiggle room at all. They just snugly fit as if they were perfectly measured. Again, just wiping out that little bit of excess glue, and then that's that side complete. And there's 2 to go on each side. So we just spin it round. And once we've got it onto the other side, we can just stick the other 2 sections, the other 2 stabilisers into this side. And then all we've got to do left is the door. So we can just put this a little bit into a little bit of fast forward because we've seen exactly the same thing on the other side. So the two halves are stuck together and then they just go into those little 6mm holes. Just make sure they're all fully lined up because you don't want them drying a bit squiffy. But the holes also help the alignment anyway, so the little lugs will just push them together to be the right alignment. Now we could just move on to the door frame. So what we have is an internal door, and we can apply some glue just to the inside rim where my paintbrush is pointing out now, just to the inside of that. And most of the detail of the doorway is actually 100% visible once it's loaded in there, and actually it's almost like it's been designed with that in mind, as if these guys had actually thought about it, which is pretty good. And all we do is just stick that on the inside. I guess you could really have the door partially open, or you could even leave it fully open and you could hide troops inside it, but then you'd end up forgetting that they're even in there. So I'm just going to close it off and just completely treat it as impassable terrain on my battlefield. And there we go, and that dries pretty quick when you're going side on like that. It's a nice little surface area. And just using my table there, which is perfectly straight-ish, to make sure that everything is flush at the bottom. And all we need to do now is put on the little door frame. So just applying a bit more PVA to the inside of that. You can see the side that has no detail on it is obviously the side to glue. And then we just put that around the door and just make sure that's lined up. Now this is a very fragile piece of MDF. It could easily snap if you're a little bit heavy-handed. So just be careful. I know some of the other kits have got very similar thin sections like this that add to the detail of the model to give it that more 3D and dynamic effect. So just got to be a bit careful the way that you apply that to the kit. So there we go, the whole kit is now fully assembled, and we're now down to the final big reveal, and that's to take the protective layer off of the actual curved plasma generator itself. A little bit tricky. Now after doing this video, I did actually find the email in my spam folder, and the guy suggests that you remove this before you glue it together because it can potentially lift the printed detail. So you have to be exceptionally careful and roll this tape back really, really gently. So what I'm going to actually do is just start this on camera and then complete it off camera, because trying to get your nails in and trying to get some lift off of the tape is actually a bit difficult to film. So my advice is, if you're going to go for this, follow the XLC's recommendation, which I did entirely ignore because I didn't see it. Does that mean I ignored it? I don't think it did. It just means I didn't see it, right? Yeah, peel this off before you put it together. Then once it's all off, the grand reveal. So it's actually a faded blue through white plasma effect. So something that I've done myself with my Games Workshop terrain, where I fade from a slightly darker blue to this, but going through to white. So it's not just a single blocked colour. It is actually a fade, and there is some detail you can see embedded into the light blue itself, so that it actually offers a little bit of effect rather than just being a colour blob of green, bluey, white. And you can see there how stable the kit is, just as I manhandle it around the desk there, and that kind of completes the build. So let's have a look at scale. Scale is always an important thing when you're talking 28mm. So here is a recently completed Armiger Knight. Now these are pretty baby knights. However, this plasma generator is higher than the Knight. So actually it's a good line blocker, line of sight blocker for something of that kind of size. So dreadnoughts, redemptors, and warglaves like this, and obviously squads of troops and so on, perfectly blocked from line of sight. So let's compare it to a couple of other bits of terrain then. So I've got a couple of recently completed containers from Games Workshop. So you can see that the height is just a little bit taller than two of these containers put together, and it's about a third wider as well. So you can see against the yellow one there just how much wider it is. So from a line of sight blocking piece of terrain, which is essential in 8th edition Warhammer 40k, if that's what you're playing, this kind of thing is a perfect sight blocker to your mid-sized Griblies and below. So there we go then, guys. That is the build of the Desecration City MDF terrain from the XLC.co.uk Kickstarter. What are my thoughts on it? Let's let's get the cons out of the way first. Well, I can only see one con, and that is the end panels themselves, the edges of the MDF that are exposed are not printed. So you do get this little effect. Let me show you this effect. If I just grab the thing here. So you can see this lovely white printed effect, but where you're wrapping it round the ends, it still sits there in the burnt MDF where the laser's gone round it. And you get it on all the sections like that are exposed. There's no printing on the end of that. Is that a showstopper? Not by a long shot. For me, this terrain is aimed primarily at people that want a quick battlefield that's not going to take them forever to assemble or require them to spend hours painting it. Now, I know some people buy terrain and just, you know, dry brush the hell out of it and it's done, but it still requires, you know, cleaning up and cutting out of sprues, all that kind of stuff, and it tends to be a little bit more expensive as well. So this terrain is perfect for those people that want a battlefield really quick. You throw in something like a game mat from gamemat.eu. Feel free to send me a product to review, guys. Stick that on your battlefield. You can fold it away, you can store it, you can sit it in a couple of boxes, and you've got a battlefield ready to go in minutes that's not taking you months and months and months of effort to put together. And that is probably the biggest positive. The second big positive for me is the price. Now, judging by the Kickstarter offers for each different tier, this isn't going to be a bank breaker. So there are various tiers, and this probably works out about, it's less than £10 is what I would say. The whole bundle, let me just double check online while we're doing this. So their first bundle is set number 1. It's a ruined church, the plasma generator, a storeroom, and 3 line of sight blocking walls, and that comes in at £35 on a pledge level. So I would guess, because I don't know the final pricing, that once it goes out of this and becomes a store item, it might be a couple of quid more expensive, because Kickstarters tend to have a little bit more encouragement in the pricing to get it funded. This project is 100% funded, so it is going to happen regardless of whether you go ahead and back the Kickstarter or wait for it to go into a production run. So there we go. That's pretty much the review. It's a minor niggle on the end panels. I think that has been addressed in part of their FAQ, that maybe a future version will include some kind of printed option around the around those burn edges of the MDF. Is it as detailed as plastic kits? No, absolutely not. It's printed MDF. Will it fulfill your tabletop needs? I would say 100% yes, and you can do it on a sensible budget. You can put as much of that stuff on your table as you want, and you can have epic games of 40k or any other 28mm sci-fi kind of related, you know, probably work for things like Infinity or stuff like that. Even War Machine will probably work for this. I mean, it's a bit steampunky, probably not so much plasma, but it certainly works from a gaming perspective. And if that's your key metric for when you're looking at terrain for your battlefield, is to make sure that it gives you good games, this will certainly work for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much to the XLC for sending me one of these pre-release copies. It's much appreciated, guys. Thank you very much. And hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.